From the beautiful California coast to the urban jungle of New York City, baseball stadiums have long been the beating heart of America's pastime. Over the years, Major League Baseball has seen many iconic ballparks come and go. While these historic MLB stadiums are now confined to the history books, they left behind rich legacies and marked key chapters to baseball's evolution.
Biggest cheers from 50,000 fans go to the immortal star himself, Babe Ruth.
The famous house that Ruth built is arguably one of the most iconic ballparks to ever house the game of baseball. The original Yankee Stadium opened its gates on April 18, 1923. It was home of the New York Yankees until 2008 as well. Located at 161st Street and River Avenue in the Bronx, the stadium was the bold vision of Yankees owners Colonel Jacob Ruppert and Colonel T.L. Huston. Ruppert and Huston purchased land less than a mile from the Polo Grounds for $675,000, which is roughly $12.6 million today. The goal was simple: give the Yankees a home of their own. Ohio-based engineering firm Osborne Engineering created the initial plans that called for a triple-deck stadium with grandstands wrapping around the entire field. The plans were modestly scaled back slightly to soften the structure's imposing presence, but the final result was still groundbreaking for the time. With 3 tiers of seating and capacity of 58,000, it became the first ballpark to officially be called a stadium, and it was a fitting name that matched its monumental scale.
We have a good hitting lineup, and we should, by rights, score enough runs to win the majority of our ball games. It leaves it up to the pitching staff from there, and if they come through, I think we will win this pennant.
Construction on the original Yankee Stadium began on May 5, 1922, and incredibly, construction wrapped up in just 284 working days. Built from steel and concrete, the stadium featured a triple-deck grandstand stretching from home plate down both baselines. Historians and diehard Yankee fans remember the iconic 15-foot copper facade that crowned the third deck, instantly recognizable to fans across generations. The original field dimensions were dramatic: 295 feet down the right field line, a cavernous 490 to center, nicknamed Death Valley, and 281 feet down to left. On opening day, April 18, 1923, the Yankees defeated the Boston Red Sox 4-1. Famous New York Yankee Babe Ruth launched a 3-run homer into the right field stands. Later that same year, the Yankees would capture their first World Series title, setting the tone for decades of dominance. During the mid-1970s, the stadium underwent a major transformation. From 1974 to 75, it was largely demolished and rebuilt. This meant the Yankees temporarily shared Shea Stadium with the Mets. Though the renovated Yankee Stadium reopened on April 15, 1976, and retained some of the original exterior walls and superstructure, the majesty that was the original ballpark was gone. The Yankees played their final game in the stadium on September 21, 2008. Demolition followed a year later in 2009. The new Yankee Stadium rose just across the street, but with a more modern design. Yet, for many fans, the new stadium would never match the grandeur of the house that Ruth and so many others helped build.
Excuse me, sir. Why do you like the Mets? But the Mets is a team that's supposed to be understood, you know? They are young, they are trying to make themselves understood, to the fact that they lose and they come behind, and that's it.
Shea Stadium wasn't just a ballpark. It was the place that gave baseball back to New Yorkers. While officially named William A. Shea Municipal Stadium, Shea Stadium, as the fans called it, served as the home for the famous New York Mets from 1964 to 2008. For a time also, from 1964 to 83, it also hosted the New York Jets. Located in historic Flushing Meadows Corona Park in Queens, the stadium honored William Shea, the attorney who championed bringing National League Baseball back to New York after the Dodgers and Giants left the cold Northeast for sunny California in 1957. Construction began on October 28, 1961, but unfortunately for the Mets, the timing was less than ideal. They were forced to play for 2 seasons at the aging Polo Grounds while Shea was being built. The stadium officially opened on April 17, 1964, with more than 50,000 fans in attendance. But of course, after all the anticipation for a new stadium, bad luck struck again with the Mets losing 4-3 to the Pittsburgh Pirates. The debut was memorable not just for the game, but for the traffic jam it caused. Parking around the new ballpark was nothing short of a nightmare. Shea was a 5-tiered facility and had a seating capacity of 55,601. It broke new ground in stadium design by featuring an extensive elevator system and motorized stands that allowed it to convert between football and baseball with ease. Instead of traditional light towers, the stadium lighting was built into the roof, which was a unique touch for its time. There were some ambitious plans for Shea after 1.7 million fans packed the stadium in its first season. These plans included adding 15,000 seats and installing a dome. However, structural studies revealed the pilings couldn't support a dome, and the idea was quickly shelved. Shea also drew criticism for its concrete-heavy design, but worse yet, its proximity to LaGuardia Airport meant that overhead planes often drowned out action on the field. Despite the setback, Shea Stadium became the stage for unforgettable moments. It played host to unforgettable events like the 1964 All-Star Game, the Mets' legendary 1969 Miracle Mets, their '86 World Series, Beatles concerts, and even a visit from the Pope. The Mets played their final game at Shea Stadium on September 28, 2008, before moving to Citi Field the following year. Demolition began not long after, and by February 2009, the legendary Shea was gone. The former site now serves as a parking lot for the Mets fans' new home, Citi Field. And don't get me wrong, I love Citi Field, I really do, but there's just nothing like Shea, I don't know. And while it might sound odd to talk about Canada when it comes to America's favorite pastime, you certainly cannot talk about stadiums of the past without talking about the Canucks. Jarry Park Stadium in Montreal was never meant to be a major league ballpark, but for 8 seasons from 1969 to 76, it was home to history. Jarry Park served as a temporary home of the Montreal Expos, Major League Baseball's first Canadian franchise. What began as a modest 3,000-seat amateur field inside Montreal's Jarry Park quickly transformed to meet the demands of the big leagues. After being awarded an expansion team in 1968, plans were drawn up for a brand new 25,000-seat stadium, which is roughly the size of today's Tropicana Field. But when the city declined to fund it, Mayor Jean Japro stepped in with a solution: expand Jarry Park through temporary construction.
After several hours of exchanging views, we managed to find a formula for agreement that seems feasible. This plan involves using the Jarry Park Stadium, which will be adapted by the city to meet the standards of the National Baseball League.
The result was a rapid build-out that added 25,000 seats, bringing the park's capacity to just over 28,000, making it the smallest stadium in the majors at the time. Despite its limitations, Jarry Park made a strong first impression. In its debut season, the Expos drew 1.2 million fans, ranking among the top 10 in attendance, even easily outpacing the Yankees, Orioles, Giants, and Phillies. And on opening day in April of 1969, more than 29,000 fans filled the stand. Unfortunately, rough Canadian winters caused construction delays thanks to lingering winter snow. This meant workers had to improvise by placing 6,000 folding chairs where permanent seats hadn't yet been installed. Jarry Park Stadium was a great example of sometimes simple just works fine. The stadium itself consisted of one tier of seating stretched from foul pole to foul pole, with bleachers in left field and a scoreboard perched behind a wire fence in right. The added convenience of a metro station and the Metropolitan Expressway made it easy for fans to get there too. Despite the crowds and its 8-season run as the Expos' home, Jarry Park was only meant to be temporary until the Olympic Stadium was ready for the 1976 Olympics. Their final game was played on September 26, 1976. Today, the site lives as a venue for concerts, exhibitions, and professional tennis, carrying forward a legacy that began with folding chairs and a dream. Shibe Park, later renamed Connie Mack Stadium, was an engineering marvel at the beginning of the 20th century. A trailblazer in ballpark design, it became a cornerstone of Philadelphia baseball history. It was the first major league stadium built entirely of steel and concrete. When it opened on April 12, 1909, it served as the home to both the Phillies from 1938 to 70 and the Philadelphia Athletics until 1954. The stadium was located at 21st Street and Lehigh Avenue in North Philadelphia. Philadelphia Athletics owner Ben Shibe funded the project at a cost of just over $300,000, which is about $11.5 million in today's dollars. Construction took just 1 year and resulted in a 23,000-seat ballpark with sweeping dimensions: 378 feet to left, 515 to center, and 340 to right. A double-deck grandstand wrapped around the infield, while open pavilion seating stretching to both foul poles, and at first, there were no seats in the outfield. Opening day for Shibe Park was a glorious disaster.
Then why are you here?
It's cheaper to get us somewhere near than in Florida.
I see, thank you.
Thank you.
The park drew a record-setting crowd of 30,162 fans, more than the stadium could even hold. Tickets for opening day sold out quickly, so that left an estimated 15,000 fans waiting outside. When some fans tried to force their way in, police were forced to intervene to prevent potential injuries. About 7,000 fans ended up standing behind the ropes in the outfield, too. Seeing a quick money-making opportunity, some enterprising residents on nearby 20th Street offered rooftop seating and window views to those with deeper pockets. But those rooftop entrepreneurs would soon lose their cash crop. The stadium's exterior was just as iconic. A dome tower at the corner of 21st and Lehigh housed offices, including a cupola where manager and owner Cornelius McGillicuddy, or Connie Mack, himself kept watch. When it was finished, Shibe Park was hailed as a palace for fans, the most beautiful and capacious baseball structure in the world. Not everyone in Philadelphia was crazy about the park's features, especially people living in high-rise buildings near the park. In the winter of 1934-35, the Athletics built the infamous Spite Fence. The fence was a 22-foot-high corrugated metal extension atop the right field wall. This raised the fence to a staggering 50 feet, and the intention was to block rooftop viewers on that 20th Street who had been charging admission during the Great Depression. The rippled surface caused unpredictable bounces, frustrating fields and fans alike. It obviously was enough for the Phillies because in the middle of the Phillies' 1938 season, the team left the deteriorating Baker Bowl and moved into Shibe Park. On May 16, 1939, the stadium even hosted the first night game in American League history. That night, the Athletics fell to the Cleveland Indians 8-3. But in 1953, the ballpark was renamed Connie Mack Stadium in honor of the legendary Athletics manager. The Athletics played their final game in Connie Mack Stadium on September 19, 1954, and the team eventually relocated to Kansas City. Phillies remained until October 1, 1970, when they closed the stadium's chapter with a 2-1 win over the Montreal Expos. In 1976, the famed Connie Mack Stadium was demolished, but its legacy still echoes through the streets of North Philadelphia.
Connie Mack Stadium, named for a man whose name will never be forgotten in Philadelphia or the Baseball Hall of Fame.
For nearly 4 decades, Memorial Stadium in Baltimore, Maryland stood as good a soldier like the veterans it was built to honor. Located at 900 East 33rd Street, it served as the home for both the Baltimore Orioles from 1954 to 91 and the Baltimore Colts from 1953 to 83. It was built on the same site as the old Municipal Stadium, named in honor of soldiers who gave their lives in World Wars I and II. A tribute was carved into the concrete wall at the home plate entrance. The original Municipal Stadium was constructed in 1922 as a football venue. It served as home to the minor league Orioles in 1944 after their previous ballpark, aptly named Oriole Park, was destroyed by fire in July of 1944. The championship crowds dwarfed those of the 1944 World Series, sending a clear message to major league owners. Baltimore was ready for the big league. Voters approved a $2.5 million plan to rebuild the stadium in 1947, and construction began in 1949 and finished in 1950. The Orioles took the field for the first game on April 20th at the newly named Memorial Stadium. While initially designed with a single-tier grandstand and seating for 31,000, the stadium was later expanded with an upper deck to accommodate 47,700 fans. It was the city's hope that the additional seating would attract a Major League Baseball franchise, and they were right. The gamble paid off in 1954 when the St. Louis Browns relocated to Baltimore and became the Orioles. The first game at Memorial Stadium was played on April 15, 1954. The ballpark featured 2 main seating decks arranged in a horseshoe shape from behind home plate down both baselines, with the lower deck stretching into the outfield. Though it may seem trivial to some, one of Memorial Stadium's standout features was its scoreboard. The historic Gunther Brewing Company sponsored the scoreboard in right center field and was the largest electrical scoreboard in the world when it was installed in 1954. Additionally, a hedge once served as the center field fence before being replaced by wire. The stadium's reddish-brown brick exterior gave it a distinctive, grounded presence. Memorial Stadium became a crucible for championships. The Orioles won World Series titles in 1966, 1970, 83, along with American League pennants in 1969, 71, and 79.
0-2 the count on Maddox. A liner, and the Orioles are the world champions.
Besides baseball, the stadium also hosted NFL games and later welcomed the Canadian Football League's Baltimore Stallions in the mid-1990s. But all good things came to an end when the Orioles played their final game at Memorial Stadium on October 6, 1991. They sadly fell to the Detroit Tigers 7-1. A heartfelt post-game ceremony featured 78 former Orioles players, culminating in the grounds crew removing home plate and delivering it by limousine to the New Camden Yards. Memorial Stadium was ultimately demolished in 2002, but its legacy of the Orioles, their World Series wins, and the countless memories from fans remain etched in Baltimore's sporting soul. Moving over to the Midwest, ask any baseball fan from Cleveland about Cleveland Stadium, and they'll likely correct you. The mistake by the lake. Commonly referred to as Municipal Stadium, Cleveland Stadium was a bold experiment in multi-purpose design. Situated near the banks of Lake Erie, it played home to both the Cleveland Indians from 1932 to 93 and the Cleveland Browns from 1946 to 95. What made Cleveland Stadium unique for its time was one of the first stadiums designed to host both baseball and football games, a feat not easy to just pull off. Ideas for the new stadium in Cleveland date back to 1903. The earliest concepts of the ballpark began with only considering 25,000-seat venue, which was fairly modest for that time. But by the late 1920s, Osborne Engineering, engineers for the original Yankee Stadium, drew up plans for something far larger. They envisioned a venue capable of hosting a wide range of events. In 1928, the city of Cleveland issued a $2.5 million bond to fund construction, making Cleveland Stadium the first in the country built with public money. Rather than use valuable real estate, the developers chose a landfill filled with old cars and tires right along the lakefront. Shovels hit the ground by June 24, 1930, and July 1, 1931, just in time for Independence Day, the steel and concrete structure was complete. Originally dubbed Lakefront Stadium, it opened without a primary tenant. At the time, the Indians were still playing at League Park and wanted to negotiate a favorable lease term before actually making the move. More than a year later, the Cleveland Indians would play their first game at the new stadium, which opened on July 31, 1932 for their first game. The stadium had a gargantuan amount of seats, a total staggering capacity of 78,189. This made it the largest stadium in the MLB for most of its existence. Even now, no baseball stadiums rivaled the seating capacity of the original Cleveland Stadium. Its layout featured a covered double-deck grandstand in a horseshoe shape behind home plate, with uncovered bleachers stretching across the outfield. The seating breakdown included 37,896 seats in the lower level, 29,380 in the upper deck, and 10,913 in the bleachers. Its sheer size made it a pitcher's park, with original dimensions of 322 feet down the lines and a daunting 463 feet to center. But having a stadium of this magnitude came with a drawback. When only 20,000 fans showed up, the stadium felt cavernous and empty. From 1934 to 46, the Indians split their schedule, playing weekends and holidays at Cleveland Stadium, playing weekdays at League Park. However, after 1946, they made the stadium their full-time home, and the stadium was renamed from Lakeside to Cleveland Municipal Stadium. Renovations took place between 1967 and 74. These renovations including modernized updates such as plastic seating and a new scoreboard. But when the Indians' performance started to take a dive in the 80s and 90s, fans began voicing their frustrations by staying home. In 1985, new owners Richard and David Jacobs began pushing for a new ballpark. The Indians would play their final game in Cleveland Municipal Stadium on October 3rd of 1993, with the Browns remaining until 1995. Demolition began in November 1996, and a new stadium for the Browns was built on the same site. It marked the end of an era for a venue that once dreamed big and was big, even if the teams didn't always deliver.
You were at the first game the Indians played here, the last game, and what kind of memories are you going to take this afternoon?
Well, what Bob Hope says, thanks for the many, many memories.
Another stadium under the moniker Municipal Stadium, Kansas City. From 1955 to 1972, Kansas City Municipal Stadium served up more than baseball. It was a crossroads of baseball, football, and community spirit. Originally built in the early 1920s as Mulbach Field, it served as the home to the minor league Kansas City Blues and the Negro League's Kansas City Monarchs. Over the decades, it evolved into a multi-purpose facility that hosted the Kansas City Athletics from 1955 to 67, and later the Kansas City Royals from 1969 to 72. The original stadium was constructed in 1923 by George Mulbach for $400,000, roughly $7.5 million in today's money. It featured a single-tier grandstand with seating for 17,000. It was renamed Ruppert Stadium in 1937 after New York Yankees owner Colonel Jacob Ruppert purchased the Blues, and then later became Blues Stadium following Ruppert's death. After Arnold Johnson acquired the Philadelphia Athletics in 1954 and moved them to Kansas City, leaders felt the stadium needed a major upgrade. In 1955, the city passed a public bond to fund the expansion, adding a double-decked grandstand from home plate to the right field foul pole and down the third base line. This took the seating capacity from a minimal 17,000 seats to a respectable capacity of 30,611. The Athletics, or as fans would later call them, simply the A's, debuted at Municipal Stadium on April 12, 1955, drawing over 30,000 fans and filling in almost every seat in the park. The ballpark had its share of quirky charm. For instance, it was home to a petting zoo and a mechanical rabbit named Harvey. The scoreboard was also salvaged from Braves Field in Boston, positioned beyond center field. In the early 1960s, AFL team owner Lamar Hunt was persuaded by then-Mayor H. Roe Bartle to relocate the Dallas Texans to Kansas City. Once again, Municipal Stadium was expanded, this time to seat 49,000 for football fans. The Texans would then become the Kansas City Chiefs and played their first game there on October 6, 1963. Municipal Stadium hosted the MLB All-Star Game in 1960 and the longest NFL game in history on Christmas Day in 1971, when the Chiefs defeated the Miami Dolphins in a playoff thriller. After the AFL-NFL merger on June 8, 1966, the stadium's limitations became clear. New regulations required venues to have a minimum capacity of 50,000. Municipal Stadium's football capacity capped at 35,000 with no room for full expansion. In 1967, more public bonds were issued to build the Truman Sports Complex, this time with separate stadiums for football and baseball. After the A's moved to Oakland in 1967, Kansas City was awarded an expansion team, the Royals, who began playing in 1969. Despite a disappointing 69-93 record, the team drew nearly 1 million fans in their inaugural season. They played their final game at Municipal Stadium on October 4th, 1972, defeating the Texas Rangers 4-0 in what was also the last Major League game managed by Hall of Famer Ted Williams. The Chiefs moved to Arrowhead Stadium that same year, and the glory that was Municipal Stadium came to an end with its demolition in 1976.
If one word could be used to describe the Braves' first season in Wisconsin, that word would be success.
Milwaukee County Stadium marked a turning point in baseball history. Completed in 1953 at a cost of $5.9 million, it was the first publicly financed Major League stadium in the United States. It was built on the site of the old Story Quarry on Milwaukee's west side and designed, like many stadiums during that time, to attract a big league team and to serve as a venue for the beloved Green Bay Packers. The minor league Milwaukee Brewers were originally set to begin play in Milwaukee County Stadium starting in 1953, but just 3 weeks before opening day, the Boston Braves announced their relocation to Milwaukee. In a twist of baseball politics, the St. Louis Browns also applied to relocate to Milwaukee, but the Braves, holding territorial rights as the parent club of the minor league Brewers, put a stop to their plan. The Brewers ultimately moved to Toledo that same year, becoming the Mud Hens. The Braves took the field at County Stadium on April 14, 1953, securing their first win at home by defeating the St. Louis Cardinals 3-2 on a walk-off home run by Bill Bruton in the 10th inning. The Braves set a National League record that season after drawing 1.8 million fans. Milwaukee County offered the team a generous lease, a minimal $1,000 per year for the first 2 seasons, followed by a 5% of ticket and concession revenue for the next 3. County Stadium was practically a perfect size for baseball too, with a seating capacity of 36,011 and field dimensions of 362 feet down the lines and 402 to center. It would become a major success for Milwaukee. The Braves even reached back-to-back World Series in 1957 and 58, securing the championship in 1957. It was so well respected that the stadium even graced the cover of the inaugural issue of Sports Illustrated on August 16, 1954, featuring Braves slugger Eddie Matthews in full swing. The magic would slowly start to wear off over time as the Braves' performance dipped in the early 1960s though, and with the poor performance of the team, attendance quickly took a dive. Despite an impressive 13 consecutive winning seasons, team ownership sought a larger television market and announced plans to move to Atlanta. A legal battle ensued, and Milwaukee successfully had the courts enforce the team's lease through 1965. The optics, however, were not the greatest as fans just weren't eager to watch a lame duck team. Just 5 years later, Major League Baseball returned to Milwaukee in 1970 with the expansion Brewers, who played their first game at County Stadium on April 7th against the California Angels. In 1973, the stadium gained its now familiar team icon, Bernie the Brewer. Bernie famously slid down a beer barrel chalet beyond the center field bleachers after each home run. The stadium was expanded in the 1970s to seat over 52,000, with the upper deck stretching over the lower grandstand to foul poles. During the 90s, construction would begin on Miller Park in 1996. County Stadium was set to close after the 1999 season. However, a construction crane unexpectedly collapsed on July 14, 1999, causing a tragic accident that claimed 3 lives and injured 5 others. The tragedy delayed the new ballpark's completion by a full year. The Brewers would play their final game at County Stadium on September 28, 2000, defeating the Cincinnati Reds. The stadium was demolished in February 2001, and today, the site is home to Little League Park Halfair Field. Three Rivers Stadium stood at the confluence of Pittsburgh sports legacy. Built to replace the aging Forbes Field originally built in 1909, it opened in July 16, 1970, and served as the home for both the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Pittsburgh Steelers for the next 3 decades. The $55 million facility was part of a broader plan to transform the riverfront near the banks of the Allegheny and Monongahela Rivers. While it was designed for efficiency, it was also a spectacle to behold. Construction began in April 1968 and stretched a grueling 29 months, frequently falling behind schedule. The stadium's debut came with a Pirates game against the Cincinnati Reds. Despite the Pirates falling 3-2 to the Reds, the team drew the largest baseball crowd in Pittsburgh history at the time. Like many other stadiums of its era, Three Rivers was a cookie-cutter multi-purpose venue. It seated 47,942 for baseball, and thanks to the recent AFL-NFL merger, 59,000 for football. It featured 5 tiers of red and yellow seats enclosing to the field. To convert between sports, 2 banks of the 4,000 ground level seats along the baselines could be repositioned to form 8,000 seats at midfield for football. The original scoreboard loomed over center field until 1983, but was later replaced by a $5 million video board tucked beneath the stadium rim. That same year, the AstroTurf surface was replaced. Just before the 1994 All-Star Game, the new blue seats were installed in the lower deck, refreshing the stadium's look. For fans who wanted a meal while they watched their home teams, there was the famed Allegheny Club, a restaurant with panoramic views of the field. It offered seating for 300 in the viewing area and 400 in the main dining room. When fans arrived outside the stadium, they were greeted by statues of sports legends Roberto Clemente and Honus Wagner. True baseball fans know Three Rivers hosted some of the most iconic moments in sports history that fans and players still talk about to this day. For instance, it became the first venue to host a World Series game played at night in 1971. But one of the most legendary moments in NFL history was made a year later, when it became the stage of the Immaculate Reception. The Pirates made playoff appearances in 5 of their first 6 seasons at the stadium, winning the 1971 World Series under manager Danny Murtaugh. But by the 1990s, the Pirates were tired of sharing the now 20-year-old stadium and pushed for a baseball-only stadium. To drive home their demand, the team threatened to leave Pittsburgh without one, and their final game at Three Rivers came on October 1st, 2000. A few months later, the stadium was imploded on February 11, 2001. What was once a glorious landmark in sports history is now little more than just parking lots and stage AE, with entrance markers still standing near Acrisure Stadium. In 2012, on the 40th anniversary of Roberto Clemente's 3,000 hits, members of the Society for American Baseball Research returned to the site. They marked and painted the locations of home plate and first base, which was a quiet tribute to a place where legends once played.
Baltimore hitters' hands, and then I had Blyleven with the curve, and when I put him in, I said, it's all over, baby.
Few stadiums carry a name as iconic or as storied as Candlestick Park. Perched on the western windswept shore of San Francisco Bay at Candlestick Point, Candlestick Park served as the home of the San Francisco Giants from 1960 to 1999, and later hosted the 49ers until 2013. Named after the long-billed curlews or candlestick birds, they once called the area home. The stadium earned a reputation as one of baseball's most challenging venues thanks to its notorious wind conditions. When the New York Giants relocated to San Francisco in 1958, the team temporarily played at Seals Stadium, a minor league field, while the city worked to fulfill its promise of a new ballpark. The city considered 2 possible locations, downtown San Francisco and Candlestick Point. Ultimately, the latter was chosen for its affordability and proximity to the city-owned land. Construction began on August 1958, making Candlestick the first modern stadium built entirely of reinforced concrete. However, the ballpark was plagued practically from the beginning with various minor and major issues. From local neighborhoods complaining to a Teamster strike, and most concerning, a grand jury investigation into fraud and funding irregularities, it seemed nothing could go right for Candlestick Park. The Giants had hoped to open in September 1959, but the stadium wasn't ready until the following spring. On April 12, 1960, then Vice President Richard Nixon threw out the ceremonial first pitch on opening day. Luck at least was on the Giants' side for that day as they beat the St. Louis Cardinals in front of a crowd of around 45,000. But the plague of issues wasn't done with Candlestick Park, and yet another issue quickly made itself known, particularly because of the stadium's location. Bay winds whipped through the structure, creating unpredictable conditions for both players and fans alike. In its first season, only 77 home runs were hit. The team quickly moved to try and correct the issue by moving the fences in 1961. During the Giants' tenure, the stadium hosted 2 MLB All-Star games in 1961 and much later in 1984. After the 1970 season, Candlestick was enclosed with outfield grandstands to prepare for the arrival of the San Francisco 49ers. The grandstands did help to reduce the wind speed slightly, but it also had a negative effect of creating swirling gusts inside and practically destroying the iconic view of the bay, which was one of the most unique features of the ballpark. Despite its challenges, Candlestick Park was the stage for 6 Giants postseason runs, including an NLCS appearance in 1971, 1987, and 1989, as well as World Series appearances in 62 and 89. It was home to sports legends like Willie Mays, Willie McCovey, and Barry Bonds, players who changed the game of baseball forever. The Giants played their final game at Candlestick on September 28, 1999, ultimately relocating to Pacific Bell Park, which is now known as Oracle Park. The 49ers continued to use the stadium until 2013, though. Its final event wasn't even sports related. Former Beatles legend Paul McCartney played a concert in August 2014, which is a music icon helping to end the legend of a unique ballpark. Demolition was completed in September 2015. The site is now staged for redevelopment into office space, which is a far cry from the history that was made on the very spot. Let's move over to the Midwest at Sportsman's Park in St. Louis. While most parks house both a baseball and football team, Sportsman's Park was rare in that it housed 2 major league teams simultaneously from 1920 to 53. Situated at the northwest corner of Grand Boulevard and Dodier Street in North St. Louis, the location played host to organized baseball since the 1860s, making it one of the sport's most storied and hallowed grounds. The modern version of Sportsman's Park took shape in 1909 when the St. Louis Browns built a new steel and concrete grandstand. It was only the 3rd of its kind in the majors and 2nd in American League after Shibe Park located in Philadelphia. The Browns repositioned the diamond in the southwest corner of the site, where it remained for the rest of the stadium's life. In 1920, the Cardinals joined the Browns as tenants after leaving the outdated Robinson Field in St. Louis. Browns owner Phil Ball had expanded the stadium's capacity from 18,000 to 30,000 in hopes of being able to host a World Series by 1926. While the Browns never reached that goal, the Cardinals did. They defeated the Yankees 4-3 in a dramatic 7-game series that year. Having two baseball teams in one stadium led to an incredibly unique situation during the 1944 World Series, though, between the Cardinals and Browns. It was the last fall classic played entirely in a single stadium shared by both competing teams. The Cardinals won the series 4-2. Sportsman's Park had its own personality and charm. For example, the Budweiser Eagle flapped its wings atop the left center scoreboard after every Cardinals home run. The Globe Democrat newspaper displayed the previous game's star on the right center wall, alongside league standing. Pavilion seats filled in the power alley in right center, and flagpoles stood in fair territory until the 1950s. Over the years, the Sportsman's Park evolved. A second deck was added from first to third base in 1909, then extended to the foul poles in 1925. Bleachers were added in 1926, however by the early 1950s, supporting two major league teams became a significant financial strain on the city and its baseball faithful. Browns owner Bill Veeck tried to outmaneuver the Cardinals with promotional flair, but when Anheuser-Busch purchased the Cardinals in 1953, Veeck knew he just couldn't compete. On April 9, 1953, Veeck sold Sportsman's Park to the Cardinals for $800,000 or nearly $9.5 million in modern money. Beverage giant Anheuser-Busch quickly renovated the aging stadium, which had fallen into such a horrible disrepair, the city had threatened to even condemn the entire venue. The Browns moved to Baltimore after the 1953 season and were renamed the Orioles. The Cardinals would rename the ballpark Busch Stadium, of course, but many longtime fans still called it Sportsman's Park. The end of an era came on May 8, 1966, when the Cardinals played their last game before moving to the new Busch Memorial Stadium downtown. Today, the site lives on as the Herbert Hoover Boys Club, where a baseball diamond quietly marks the spot where legends once played. So let's move over to Busch Memorial Stadium. St. Louis is no stranger to an iconic ballpark and securing its spot in baseball history. Busch Memorial Stadium stood as a symbol of St. Louis's sporting ambition. It was a downtown landmark that served as home to the Cardinals from 1966 to 2005. It also briefly hosted the NFL Cardinals and St. Louis Rams. Originally known as Civic Center Busch Memorial Stadium, it joined the collective of other multi-purpose cookie-cutter stadiums built between the 1960s and 70s. During the years, the Cardinals played at the aging Sportsman's Park. Plans for a new stadium had circulated as there was a desperate need for a modern replacement. In the early 1960s, beer giant Anheuser-Busch, which already had a long history with the Cardinals, pledged $5 million toward the $20 million project, and ground was broken on May 24, 1964, and the stadium rose on 30 acres in the heart of downtown. Nearly 2 years later, the Cardinals will play their first game there on May 12, 1966. Fans filled 4 tiers of 46,068 red seats encircling a pristine grass field. Behind the outfield fence stood a $1.5 million scoreboard featuring an electronic cardinal that chirped after home runs. Designed by American-based engineering companies Sverdrup and Parcel and built by German-based company Grun and Bilfinger, the stadium's most distinctive feature was its roof. A 96-arch crown of arches created by architect Edward Durrell Stone. It was inspired by the famous Gateway Arch, which had only been completed a year earlier. It gave the stadium a visual identity that set it apart from its peers in Atlanta, Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh. In 1970, AstroTurf replaced the natural grass to allow easier conversion between football and baseball. 2 sets of 8,000 movable seats could be repositioned to form the football gridiron. After the NFL Cardinals moved to Phoenix in 1987, Busch became a baseball-only venue. That was until the Rams arrived in 1995. They played part of their inaugural season at Busch before eventually moving to Edward Jones Dome, which opened on November 12, 1995. The final football game at the stadium was played on October 22, 1995 against the San Francisco 49ers. With football gone, the stadium was retrofitted for baseball. Natural grass returned, new seats and scoreboards were installed, bullpens were relocated behind the outfield fence, and the area beyond the outfield was enhanced. The renovations were a short-lived quality of life improvement until the Cardinals played their final game at Busch Memorial Stadium on October 19, 2005, the night of Game 6 of the National League Championship Series. Demolition began later that year and the stadium was brought down by a wrecking ball. Its successor, Busch Stadium III, opened April 4, 2006 and rose just south of its predecessor, occupying part of the original footprint, a quiet echo of what once stood. From the windswept edges of Candlestick Point to the echoing arches of Busch Memorial, these stadiums were more than concrete and steel. They were each chapters in the living story of baseball. They held the weight of triumph and heartbreak. Some were part of baseball legends and others barely survived controversy, and though many have been demolished and are long gone, on, I mean, their memory endures in the cheers they once held, the players they cradled, and their communities that they helped shape. This collection is not just a record of ballparks, it's a tribute to the architectural marvels and masterpieces where baseball was more than just a game.
Major League Baseball stadiums are usually remembered at their peak. The packed crowds, the playoff noise, the old scoreboards, the upper decks, the strange outfield dimensions, the final pitch, the walk-off home run. The place where a team's identity was built over decades, but the ending is usually much uglier. When a franchise leaves a stadium behind, the building does not always get a clean goodbye. Sometimes it sits empty for years. Sometimes it becomes a political headache. Sometimes it gets torn down quickly, leaving only a patch of land where a city once gathered by the thousands. And sometimes the strangest outcome happens. The stadium survives, but the sport that made it famous is gone. That is what makes abandoned MLB stadiums so interesting. They are not only old ballparks, they are leftovers from baseball's constant search for something newer, richer, cleaner, and more controllable. Some of these stadiums were considered wonders when they opened. Some were loved by generations of fans, some were hated by the players who had to use them, some were never built for baseball properly in the first place. But all of them tell the same basic story. Major League Baseball moved on, and the stadium was left behind. The best place to start is Houston because no former MLB stadium has a stranger afterlife than the Astrodome. The Houston Astrodome opened in 1965, and at the time it felt like something from the future. It was billed as the 8th wonder of the world, and for good reason. It was the world's first fully enclosed air-conditioned stadium of its size, built to protect fans and players from Houston's heat, rain, humidity, and mosquitoes. The Astros played the first indoor Major League Baseball game there on April 9, 1965, against the New York Yankees in an exhibition game. Baseball had never seen anything like it. The Astrodome was not just a stadium, it was a statement. Houston was telling the rest of the country that it was modern, ambitious, and willing to build big. The building had a roof when baseball was still used to open skies. It had air conditioning when summer games in Texas could be brutal. It was connected to the rise of artificial turf because natural grass could not survive properly under the original roof panels. Even the name AstroTurf came out of that building's influence. For decades, the Astrodome was one of the most recognizable stadiums in America. It hosted the Astros, the NFL's Houston Oilers, concerts, rodeos, boxing, college sports, and major civic events. But by the 1990s, the building that once looked futuristic started to feel outdated. Newer stadiums were being designed around luxury suites, club seating, baseball-specific sightlines, open-air views, and stronger revenue streams. The Astros left after the 1999 season for what is now Dakin Park. That could have been the end of the story, but the Astrodome did not disappear. Instead, it became one of the most famous stadium limbo cases in the world. It remained standing at NRG Park next to newer facilities, but without a permanent everyday use. In 2005, it became nationally visible again when it sheltered evacuees from Hurricane Katrina. But after that, its long-term purpose became harder and harder to define. The building was too historic to casually destroy, but too expensive to easily restore. It has been designated a state antiquities landmark, and preservation groups have continued pushing for reuse plans. But the dome's future has remained unresolved for years. That is why the Astrodome is the strongest abandoned MLB stadium story. It is not abandoned in the way an old factory might be abandoned, with broken windows and weeds growing through the floor. It is abandoned in a civic sense. Baseball left. Football left, the major events left, and what remains is a huge historic building that Houston still has not fully figured out. The Astrodome was once a symbol of the future. Now it is a symbol of how hard the future can be to preserve. Detroit's Tiger Stadium tells a very different kind of story. If the Astrodome was futuristic, Tiger Stadium was traditional. It opened in 1912 as Navin Field, the same year as Fenway Park in Boston. Over time, it became Briggs Stadium and eventually Tiger Stadium, but fans knew it best by its location, the corner of Michigan and Trumbull. That corner became one of the most important addresses in baseball. Tiger Stadium was not sleek, it was not polished, it was old, tight, loud, and full of character. The upper deck hung close to the field. The right field overhang became one of the stadium's most famous features. The sightlines were unusual, the steel was aging, and the building felt completely different from the newer stadiums that followed. But that was exactly why people loved it. The Tigers played there through World Series seasons, Hall of Fame careers, and decades of Detroit baseball history. Ty Cobb, Hank Greenberg, Al Colleen, Willie Horton, Alan Trammell, Lou Whitaker, and many others were tied to that site. Tiger Stadium was not just where the Tigers played, it was part of how Detroit understood the team. The Tigers played their final game at Tiger Stadium on September 27, 1999. After that, they moved to Comerica Park, a modern downtown ballpark with more space, more amenities, and a design better suited to the business side of baseball. But Tiger Stadium did not come down right away. It sat empty while preservation groups, city officials, and developers argued over what should happen next. That long pause made the ending more painful. For nearly a decade, the old stadium remained there in pieces, caught between memory and reality. Fans wanted it saved, the city wanted a practical solution. Developers wanted usable land. The cost of keeping the structure alive kept rising. Demolition began in 2008 and was completed in 2009. But unlike many demolished stadiums, Tiger Stadium did not vanish completely. The playing field was preserved and later became part of the Corner Ballpark, a youth sports facility on the historic site. The grandstand is gone, but the baseball footprint remains. That gives Tiger Stadium one of the more respectful endings on this list. It was still a loss, but not a total erasure. You can still understand where the field was. You can still stand at the corner and know what happened there. A lot of abandoned stadium stories are about neglect. Tiger Stadium is more about grief. The city knew what the place meant. The problem was that emotion alone could not pay for restoration, maintenance, or redevelopment. In the end, only part of the stadium's memory survived. RFK Stadium opened in the 1960s as a multi-purpose venue, built for both baseball and football. Over its life, it hosted the Washington Senators, Washington's NFL team, DC United, concerts, international soccer, and countless public events. But its final MLB chapter came much later, when the Montreal Expos relocated to Washington and became the Nationals. From 2005 through 2007, RFK Stadium served as the temporary home of the Washington Nationals. It was not perfect, and it was never meant to be permanent, but it gave Major League Baseball a bridge back into the nation's capital while Nationals Park was being built. The Nationals moved into Nationals Park in 2008, and RFK's role started shrinking. For a while, the building still had other tenants and uses, but over time, the stadium became less of a venue and more of a fenced-off reminder. The land was valuable, the building was aging, the maintenance costs were difficult to justify, and the longer it sat, the clearer it became that RFK was not coming back as a major sports stadium. By the mid-2020s, demolition was underway. As of June 2026, Events DC reported that RFK Stadium demolition work had reached its final stages, with sustainability efforts diverting roughly 95% of demolition waste from landfill. That included tens of thousands of tons of concrete and thousands of tons of steel and metal. RFK's baseball history was not as long as Tiger Stadium's. It was not as revolutionary as the Astrodome, but it still matters because RFK represents a common stadium pattern. Useful, then outdated, then too expensive to keep. For the Nationals, RFK was a waiting room. For the city, it became a question mark. And for fans, it became another example of a stadium that outlived its original purpose. Then there is Montreal's Olympic Stadium, one of the strangest MLB stadium stories ever. Olympic Stadium was built for the 1976 Summer Olympics, then became the long-term home of the Montreal Expos. It was massive, expensive, and architecturally bold, with its famous leaning tower and retractable roof concept. The idea was ambitious. The reality was messy. The stadium was not finished the way it was intended when the Olympics arrived. The roof system became a long-running problem, with delays, repairs, tiers, and restrictions over the years. For baseball, the building was awkward. It was huge. It was often criticized for feeling cold and distant. The playing surface had issues. The atmosphere could be impressive when the Expos were drawing well, but when crowds were smaller, the size of the building made the empty space feel even worse. The Expos' problems were not only about the stadium, ownership instability, financial issues, market challenges, and the failed push for a new downtown ballpark all played a role, but Olympic Stadium became the physical symbol of everything that went wrong. It was too big, too troubled, and too tied to old Olympic debt and government control. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, the Expos were no longer just trying to compete on the field. They were fighting for survival. Their proposed downtown ballpark, Labatt Park, never happened. The franchise eventually relocated after the 2004 season and became the Washington Nationals. Olympic Stadium still stands today. It hosts events, and it remains one of Montreal's most recognizable buildings. But as an MLB stadium, it is abandoned. The Expos are gone, Major League Baseball is gone, the building is still there, but the team that gave it regular baseball life disappeared more than 2 decades ago. That makes Olympic Stadium different from the others. It is not a ruin, it is not a demolished site. It is a giant reminder of a baseball city that lost its team. And for Montreal fans, that matters. The stadium is still visible, you can still see it from across the city. You can still point to it and say, that is where the Expos played. But that also means the loss never fully leaves. Oakland Coliseum is the newest entry in this story, and in some ways it is the most painful because it just happened. The Oakland Athletics played at the Coliseum from 1968 through 2024. During that run, the A's won championships, built dynasties, developed stars, and created one of baseball's most distinct fan cultures. The Coliseum was never considered one of MLB's prettiest ballparks. It was a multi-purpose stadium, shared for many years with the NFL's Raiders, and it became famous for its enormous foul territory, aging infrastructure, and the giant outfield seating structure known as Mount Davis. But the building had something many newer stadiums struggle to create: personality. The Coliseum had drums, it had banners, it had loyal fans who kept showing up through years of uncertainty. It had a raw edge that matched Oakland itself. It was flawed, sometimes ugly, and often criticized, but it was not generic. For years, the Athletics searched for a new stadium solution in Oakland. Plans came and went. Howard Terminal became the major proposal, but that project did not materialize in time to keep the franchise in the city. Eventually, the A's shifted toward Las Vegas. Their lease at the Coliseum expired after the 2024 season, and the team announced plans to play from 2025 through 2027 at Sutter Health Park in West Sacramento, while pursuing a permanent stadium in Las Vegas. That move changed the Coliseum immediately. It may still exist, it may still host events, but as an MLB ballpark, it became part of history. The Athletics left Oakland, and with that, the last major professional team tied to the Coliseum era was gone. Oakland's loss is bigger than one stadium. The Warriors moved from Oakland to San Francisco, the Raiders left for Las Vegas, then the Athletics left too. A city that once had 3 major teams was left without any of them. The Coliseum became the physical symbol of that collapse. That is why it belongs here, even if it is not fully abandoned in the traditional sense. Baseball abandoned the Coliseum. And for Oakland fans, that is the part that matters. Candlestick Park is another case where the building is gone, but the site and memory still feel unfinished. The San Francisco Giants played at Candlestick Park from 1960 through 1999. It was built during a different stadium era, when cities were trying to create larger facilities that could serve major sports and civic events. Candlestick became famous for wind, cold, and difficult baseball conditions. It was not the cozy waterfront experience that Giants fans know today at Oracle Park, but Candlestick was still home. Willie Mays played there. Willie McCovey played there. The Giants had decades of history there. The stadium hosted the 1989 World Series, remembered not only for baseball but for the Loma Prieta earthquake that struck before Game 3 between the Giants and the Oakland Athletics. The Giants left after the 1999 season for their new ballpark downtown. Candlestick continued as the home of the San Francisco 49ers, until the NFL team moved to Levi's Stadium after the 2013 season. After that, Candlestick's future was finished. The stadium was demolished in 2015. On paper, that sounds simple. Team leaves, stadium comes down, land gets redeveloped. But stadium sites are rarely that simple. Candlestick's former land became part of a long redevelopment story, tied to housing, infrastructure, and broader plans for the area. The stadium itself was gone, but the transformation of the site moved slowly. That gives Candlestick a different kind of abandoned feeling. It was not just a building left behind. It was a piece of city land waiting for a new identity. Candlestick also shows why abandoned stadium does not always mean the structure is still standing. Sometimes demolition only removes the most visible part of the problem. The deeper issue is what the city does with the space after the crowds are gone. Cleveland Municipal Stadium was one of the great examples of the old Civic Stadium model. It opened in 1931 and became home to both the Cleveland Indians and the Cleveland Browns. For baseball, it was huge. The stadium could hold massive crowds, but during weaker attendance years, the size worked against the experience. A crowd that might feel respectable in a smaller ballpark could look swallowed by empty seats in Cleveland Municipal Stadium. The Indians played their final game there on October 3, 1993, then moved to Jacobs Field, now Progressive Field, in 1994. That move was part of a larger wave of baseball-specific ballparks that changed MLB in the 1990s. Teams wanted smaller venues with better sightlines, club seating, premium revenue, and a stronger connection to downtown development. Cleveland Municipal Stadium belonged to an earlier idea of public sports architecture: big, functional, shared, and not especially intimate. The Browns remained until 1995, but after the franchise's move to Baltimore, the stadium's fate was sealed. It was demolished in 1996, and a new Browns stadium was later built on the same lakefront site. Cleveland Municipal Stadium's story is not as emotional as Ebbets Field or Tiger Stadium, but it is important because it explains why so many MLB teams left older facilities behind. By the 1990s, stadium economics had changed. The old multi-purpose bowl was no longer enough. Baseball wanted ballparks that felt tailored to baseball and generated more money per fan. That shift saved some franchises from leaving their cities, but it also turned older stadiums into dead weight. The Polo Grounds takes us further back, into one of baseball's most unusual stadium stories. The final version of the Polo Grounds was best known as the home of the New York Giants before the franchise moved to San Francisco after the 1957 season. Its dimensions were bizarre, very short down the lines, extremely deep to center field, and completely unlike the standardized parks that came later. It looked strange because it was strange, and that made it one of the most memorable stadiums in baseball history. The Polo Grounds hosted famous moments including Bobby Thompson's shot heard round the world in 1951 and Willie Mays' over-the-shoulder catch in the 1954 World Series, but after the Giants left New York, the stadium's purpose changed. It sat largely vacant before the New York Titans, later the Jets, used it. Then the expansion New York Mets played there in 1962 and 1963 while Shea Stadium was being built. The Mets' stay was temporary from the beginning. The Polo Grounds was old, awkward, and headed for demolition. The Mets played their final game there in 1963, and the stadium was demolished in 1964. The Polo Grounds matters because it shows that baseball has been leaving important places behind for a long time. This is not just a modern problem caused by luxury suites and naming rights deals. Even in the 1950s and 1960s, teams were leaving old stadiums when the economics, geography, or ownership plans changed. And finally, there is Ebbets Field. Ebbets Field was the home of the Brooklyn Dodgers, and its story remains one of the most emotional stadium losses in American sports. The ballpark opened in 1913 and became tied to Brooklyn's identity. It was not the biggest stadium, it was not the most modern, but it was deeply connected to the borough, the fans, and the Dodgers' place in daily life. The Dodgers played their final game at Ebbets Field on September 24, 1957, beating the Pittsburgh Pirates 2-0 in front of only 6,702 fans. After the season, the Dodgers moved to Los Angeles. Ebbets Field was demolished in 1960. That final attendance number is one of the strangest details in baseball history. A stadium now remembered as sacred ground hosted its final Dodgers game in front of a small crowd. At the time, the full weight of the loss had not yet settled in. Only later did Ebbets Field become a symbol of everything Brooklyn had lost. The Dodgers' move west changed baseball. It helped open the door for MLB's coast-to-coast future. But for Brooklyn, it left behind a wound. Ebbets Field became more powerful in memory than it had been in its final years. The stadium was gone, but the argument over what it meant never really ended. That is the real pattern with abandoned MLB stadiums. The building may be gone, but the story remains. The Astrodome is still standing, waiting for a permanent answer. Tiger Stadium was mostly demolished, but its field survives. RFK Stadium became a demolition project after years of uncertainty. Olympic Stadium still dominates Montreal, even though the Expos are gone. Oakland Coliseum now represents a fresh baseball departure. Candlestick Park disappeared, but its land carried the weight of what came next. Cleveland Municipal Stadium showed why the old multi-purpose giants faded. The Polo Grounds and Ebbets Field proved that baseball has always been willing to leave history behind when the business case points somewhere else. These stadiums were abandoned in different ways. Some were physically abandoned. Some were financially abandoned. Some were politically abandoned. Some were abandoned by the teams that once made them famous. A new stadium tells fans what a franchise wants to become. An abandoned stadium tells fans what the franchise was willing to leave behind.
From Ebbets Field, where Jackie Robinson broke baseball's color barrier, to the Polo Grounds with its bizarre 483-foot center field, these ballparks were torn down as teams moved on to bigger, more modern homes. Here are some of Major League Baseball's most iconic ballparks that left their mark on America's pastime before disappearing forever. Hey, I'm Mike, and welcome back to TFC Stadiums. Our first stadium on the dock today is Forbes Field. Named for British General John Forbes, the ballpark opened on June 30th, 1909, becoming one of the earliest Major League ballparks built entirely of steel and concrete. Backed by a $1 million investment from owner Barney Dreyfuss, the park featured a neoclassical design with a limestone and brick facade accented by terracotta ornamentation. The ballpark's steel framework used riveted construction, which was state-of-the-art for its time. Above it rose a barrel-vaulted roof supported by steel trusses, while underground, pipes and gravel beds formed a drainage system that kept the field dry. As a pitcher's park, the playing field measured 360 feet down the left field line, 376 down the right field line, and 462 feet to center field. The outfield walls stood 12 feet high throughout, constructed of reinforced concrete and covered with ivy in later years. The warning track extended 15 feet from the wall and consisted of crushed brick mixed with clay. Seating 25,000 fans, Forbes Field introduced several innovations, including the first luxury boxes in baseball history, located on the mezzanine level behind home plate. Over the years, the ballpark became the stage for historic moments. Babe Ruth hit the final 3 home runs of his career there on May 25, 1935, and Bill Mazeroski hit a walk-off home run in Game 7 to clinch the 3rd World Series title for the Pirates in 1960. 11 years later, the stadium was demolished. Comiskey Park opened on July 1, 1910, with a red brick facade trimmed in limestone that reflected Chicago's industrial character. Built for $750,000 under Charles Comiskey's ownership, it quickly earned the nickname the Baseball Palace of the World for its size and luxurious design. Structurally, it was the 3rd steel and concrete ballpark to open in the major leagues. At its opening, it seated 32,000 fans, making it one of the largest ballparks of its era. A roof of steel trusses supported a canopy that extended over the entire seating area, protecting fans while creating a distinctive architectural profile. The original design also included luxury boxes behind home plate and a press box that was considered state-of-the-art for its time. On the field, Comiskey Park featured symmetrical dimensions of 362 feet down both foul lines and 420 feet to center, with outfield walls standing 12 feet high throughout. After decades of Comiskey family ownership, the park took on a new identity under Bill Veeck in the late 1950s. His innovations include the famous exploding scoreboard, which fired fireworks after White Sox home runs using compressed air systems and electrical circuits. It hosted the infamous 1919 Black Sox scandal, and 60 years later, Disco Demolition Night in 1979, when a promotion spiraled into a riot that forced the White Sox to forfeit a game. After 80 years of surface, Comiskey Park was demolished in 1990, and the White Sox move across the street to their new stadium. And if you've been to any of these stadiums, let us know in the comments. This next one I'm so excited to discuss because, in fact, we may see a game soon at a replica stadium not too far down the street. The Polo Grounds earned its nickname as baseball's bathtub thanks to its bizarre horseshoe configuration and the most extreme playing dimensions in Major League history. The foul lines measure just 270 feet to left and 258 to right, while center field stretched an incredible 483 feet from home plate. Along the lines, the walls stood 17 feet high, but in the vast center field area known as the dead fields, they dropped to only 8 feet. Routine fly balls down the lines could leave the park, while towering drives to center field usually stayed in play. The stadium's final incarnation opened in 1911 with a capacity of 55,000, ranking among the largest ballparks of its era. Its arched windows and decorative stonework gave it a cathedral-like presence. Inside, a sweeping double-deck grandstand stretched from foul pole to foul pole, with the upper deck jutting over the lower level. Beyond the natural grass field and cinder warning tracks stood a manually operated scoreboard in center, flanked by the clubhouses built directly into the wall. Over the decades, the Polo Grounds staged unforgettable moments, including Bobby Thompson's shot heard round the world in 1951 and Willie Mays' over-the-shoulder catch in the 1954 World Series. But in 1964, the ballpark was demolished, and today the Polo Grounds Towers housing complex covers the site. Tiger Stadium was known for its right field upper deck, which famously overhung the playing field and created a short 115-foot foul territory where even routine pop flies could clear the fence as home runs. In 1912, the site was completely rebuilt as Navin Field, with a capacity of 23,000, eventually expanding to more than 52,000. Over the decades, it became known simply as The Corner, a ballpark that came to define baseball in Detroit. The field measured 340 feet to left, 325 to right, and 440 to center, with walls ranging from 8 feet in right to 11 feet in left. Its steel and concrete grandstands gave the park strength through support pillars obstructed views. A crushed brick warning track surrounded natural grass with a crowned infield for drainage, and the manual scoreboard in left was operated from inside the wall. Renovations over time added upper decks and enclosed the design, with the double-deck layout eventually wrapping around the field to create an intimate atmosphere despite its size. Tiger Stadium also carried some of the game's most historic moments. Lou Gehrig ended his consecutive game streak here on May 2, 1939, removing himself from the Yankees lineup after 2,130 consecutive games. Nearly 3 decades later, Detroit fans celebrated the Tigers' 1968 World Series championship on the same turf. By 2009, the stadium was demolished, and today the site serves the community as the Corner Ballpark Youth Facility. Crosley Field was defined by one of baseball's most unusual playing surfaces. In the outfield, a sloped terrace began about 20 feet from the wall and rose at a 15-degree angle to street level. Along with its hillside incline, the field measured 328 feet down the left field line, 325 down the right, and 387 to center. The outfield's walls range from 12 feet in left to 15 in center, with the terrace stretching beyond to meet the street grade. The stadium originally opened as Redland Field on April 11, 1912, with a capacity of 25,000 that later grew to 29,000. A roof supported by steel trusses formed a distinctive canopy that shielded fans from the weather and helped amplify crowd noise. In the decades after its opening, Crosley Field made history on May 24, 1935, when it hosted Major League Baseball's first night game under a lighting system of 632 bulbs mounted on 8 towers. 3 years later, Johnny Vandermeer added to the Crosley Field legacy by pitching back-to-back no-hitters. Its demolition in 1972 made way for industrial development. Charles Ebbets transformed a garbage dump called Pigtown into baseball's most beloved ballpark when Ebbets Field opened on April 9, 1913. Built at a cost of $750,000, the stadium welcomed 32,000 fans in an intimate design that kept them close to the game. It featured a distinctive double-deck design with a rotunda entrance that became iconic to Brooklyn fans. Inside the rotunda, marble-lined walls surrounded floor tiles arranged to resemble baseball stitches. Chandeliers made from bats held glowing baseball-shaped globes, and on the field, dimensions stretched 419 feet to center, 348 to left, and 297 to right. Looming over right field was a 40-foot manually operated scoreboard, highlighted by the famous Abe Stark clothing store sign that dared hitters to hit sign, win suit. The ballpark relied on reinforced concrete throughout its grandstand, with a steel framework supporting the upper deck. Bedford Avenue pressed tight against the right field wall, creating quirky dimensions that favored left-handed power hitters. The outfield walls stood 10 feet high in left and right and rose to 19 feet in center, with a crushed brick warning track circling the field. Ebbets Field became the stage for some of baseball's most historic moments. Jackie Robinson broke the sport's color barrier in 1947. Less than a decade later, the Dodgers won their only Brooklyn World Series title in 1955. But 2 years later, the team moved to Los Angeles, and by 1960, the stadium was demolished. From Comiskey Park, remembered as the baseball palace of the world, to Tiger Stadium, where Detroit fans celebrated a World Series crown, these historic parks define their cities and their eras. Even after demolition, their stories remain woven into the history of the game. So, which of these historic ballparks is your favorite? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you next time.
Baseball stadiums come and go, but the memories made in them last forever. Today, we're looking at 7 famous baseball stadiums that no longer exist. Each of these parks hosted countless games and created lasting memories for fans. But for various reasons, new construction, changing team needs, or urban development, they've all been demolished or repurposed. From the iconic Old Yankee Stadium to the windswept Candlestick Park, these stadiums each had unique features and fascinating histories. Let's explore what made them special, what happened to them, and what stands in their place today. When it opened in 1923, Old Yankee Stadium made quite an impression. Built entirely of limestone, it was baseball's first 3-tiered stadium and showed off the Yankees' financial power. The stadium stood until 2010, when it was demolished after the team moved to their new home across the street. The stadium had a grand entrance designed like a triumphal arch and featured a distinctive copper frieze on the roof of the upper deck. This decorative element was so popular that they included it in the design of the new stadium, one of the few physical connections to the original building. Built in the Bronx on a former lumber yard, the stadium cost $2.5 million in 1923, about $43 million in today's money. It was entirely funded by Yankees owner Jacob Ruppert. Over its lifetime, it hosted an impressive 37 World Series and 4 All-Star games. Don Larson threw his perfect game here during the 1956 World Series. The stadium also hosted 3 papal masses, showing how these venues often served multiple purposes beyond baseball. Today, if you visit the site, you'll find Heritage Field, a public park with plaques marking where home plate and the bases once were. Shea Stadium, home of the New York Mets, opened in 1964 with a modern look that contrasted with more traditional ballparks. Its circular design featured colorful exterior panels that brightened up the Queens skyline. After 45 years, it was demolished in 2009, and its footprint now serves as a parking lot for Citi Field, which was built next door. For its time, Shea was quite innovative, featuring 21 escalators and 54 restrooms. Pretty luxurious for the 1960s. The stadium also boasted a massive 86-foot by 175-foot scoreboard with a unique slide projector screen. It was part of a larger project to revitalize the Flushing Meadows area and was designed as a multi-purpose facility to maximize revenue. Shea hosted plenty of memorable events, including the Miracle Mets 1969 World Series victory. It also became a cultural landmark when the Beatles played their famous 1965 concert there, one of the first major stadium concerts in rock history. After 9/11, the stadium served as an emergency staging area, showing how these venues often become community gathering points during crises. Candlestick Park in San Francisco was a real trend center when it opened in 1960, being the first modern stadium built entirely of reinforced concrete. The stadium had an interesting boomerang-shaped grandstand that was specifically designed to block San Francisco's famous strong winds, though most fans would tell you it didn't work very well. Located at Candlestick Point on San Francisco Bay, the stadium became famous for its brutal playing conditions. The winds and fog were so bad that summer games often felt like winter ones, with fans bundled up in jackets even in July. Built for $15 million in 1960, about $150 million in today's dollars, the project wasn't without controversy. The land deals surrounding Candlestick's construction triggered a grand jury investigation, an early example of the complicated public-private partnerships that often come with stadium projects. Candlestick hosted some noteworthy events, including the final Beatles concert in 1966. But its most famous moment probably came during the 1989 World Series, when the Loma Prieta earthquake struck just before Game 3. Millions of TV viewers watched as the stadium shook on live television. The Giants left for their new ballpark in 2000, but Candlestick continued hosting the 49ers football team until 2013. The stadium was demolished in 2015 after sitting empty for 2 years. Comiskey Park opened in 1910 and was one of the first truly modern ballparks. It featured a multi-tiered design that brought fans closer to the action, something we take for granted today. The park cost about $750,000 to build in 1910, roughly $22 million in today's dollars. It was financed by team owner Charles Comiskey. The stadium had a few unique features, including an asymmetrical outfield and an exploding scoreboard that lit up after White Sox home runs. Pretty high-tech for its day. Located at 35th Street and Shields Avenue on Chicago's South Side, Comiskey was firmly rooted in a working-class neighborhood, which contributed to the White Sox blue-collar image and fan culture. The stadium hosted baseball's first All-Star game in 1933, but was also the site of the sport's biggest scandal, the infamous 1919 Black Sox World Series, where 8 players were accused of intentionally losing games. Beyond baseball, Comiskey hosted other events, including Joe Louis's famous 1937 boxing match against James J. Braddock. After serving Chicago's South Side for 80 years, it was demolished in 1991. If you visit Guaranteed Rate Field, originally called New Comiskey Park, you'll find that the old stadium's footprint is now a parking lot. Memorial Stadium in Baltimore had a distinctive horseshoe-shaped design with an open field, which immediately set it apart from other stadiums of its era when it opened in 1950. Fans particularly loved its dramatic upper deck that extended far over the lower field, creating an intimate feeling despite the stadium size. Built for $6.5 million, approximately $79 million today, through a combination of public bonds and private investment, the stadium represented a community-wide commitment to bringing Major League Baseball to Baltimore. Unlike many stadiums isolated in sports complexes or downtown districts, Memorial Stadium sat at 33rd Street in a residential Baltimore neighborhood. This unique location created an unmatched community feel, with fans often walking to games from nearby homes, a neighborhood ballpark on a grand scale. The stadium hosted the 1958 All-Star Game and served as home field for the Orioles championship teams in 1966, 1970, and 1983. When the Orioles departed for Camden Yards in 1993, the stadium briefly found a new purpose as a temporary home for the NFL's Ravens from 1996 to 1997. After remaining practically empty for years, it was demolished in 2001. Turner Field has an unusual origin story. It wasn't originally built for baseball at all. It started as Centennial Olympic Stadium for the 1996 Atlanta Games and was then converted for the Braves. Despite being relatively young, the Braves left after just 20 seasons, moving to the suburban Truist Park after the 2016 season. The financial numbers are pretty interesting here. The initial Olympic construction cost $209 million, with another $209 million spent converting it to a baseball-only facility. The stadium featured a massive Braves Vision video board and included the Braves Museum and Hall of Fame right within the stadium complex. Located in downtown Atlanta on the former site of Fulton County Stadium's parking lot, Turner Field hosted the 2000 MLB All-Star Game and was the site of Chipper Jones' final game in 2012. Unlike most abandoned stadiums that get demolished, Turner Field got a third life. Georgia State University purchased and renovated it into a football stadium. So, while Major League Baseball is left, the building itself still stands, now as a college sports venue. Bush Memorial Stadium, which opened in 1966, was a classic example of the cookie-cutter, multi-purpose stadiums that were popular in that era. Despite having a somewhat standard design, it did have some distinctive features, most notably the arched openings around its exterior that referenced St. Louis' famous Welcome Arch. After serving Cardinals fans for 40 years, it was demolished in 2005 to make way for the new Bush Stadium. Built for $24 million in 1966, about $215 million today, the stadium was primarily financed by Anheuser-Busch, which owned the Cardinals at the time. One of its most recognizable features was the large electronic scoreboard shaped like a giant Anheuser-Busch eagle, an early example of corporate branding in sports venues. Located in downtown St. Louis, the stadium was part of a larger urban renewal project for the city. During its lifetime, Bush Memorial witnessed plenty of baseball history. It hosted the 1966 All-Star Game in its very first season and was where Mark McGwire hit his record-breaking 60-second home run in 1998. The Cardinals also won the World Series here in 1982 and 2006. When they built the new Busch Stadium, they incorporated some elements from the old stadium into the design, passing along architectural DNA from one generation to the next. These stadiums may be gone now, but they left quite a legacy in MLB history. Each one had its own quirks, stories, and memorable moments that fans still talk about today. While newer stadiums offer more amenities and modern comforts, there's something special about these classic ballparks that continues to capture our imagination.
10 MLB stadiums that no longer exist. Yankee Stadium. Opened in 1923, the original Yankee Stadium was the home of New York Yankees until 2008. There is some debate as to whether or not the renovated Yankee Stadium in 1976 should count as a different version of the original that opened in 1923. But for the sake of this video, we will consider them one and the same. Yankee Stadium was the house that Ruth built. The Yankees were a powerhouse during their time in the ballpark, with 25 World Series titles and numerous Hall of Famers donning the pinstripes in Ruth, Gehrig, Mantle, Berra and Jeter, just to name a few. It was and still is considered as one of the most iconic stadiums of all time, with a short porch in the right field and the blacked out area over the center field wall. Let us not forget about the white facade in covering most of the center field area as well, a feature that the new Yankee Stadium replicated, along with many other features of the old one. Yankees moved to the new Yankee Stadium in 2009, and the original Yankee Stadium was demolished in 2010, and the site converted into a public park known today as Heritage Field. Shea Stadium. The home to New York Mets from 1964 until 2008, Shea Stadium was also the home to NFL team New York Jets and also hosted the Yankees in 1974 and 1975, and New York Giants in 1975. One would be remiss not to mention the other New York team with an iconic stadium that was demolished in 2009. Shea Stadium was originally named Flushing Meadow Park Municipal Stadium, but the name was so unpopular that it was changed to Shea Stadium after lawyer William Shea, who was one of the biggest proponents of bringing another team to New York once the Giants were relocated to San Francisco. The ballpark was a classic multi-purpose venue that hosted both baseball and football games during its history, along with a famous Beatles concert in 1965 and epic pro wrestling matches to boot. In fact, Shea was well known for hosting some of the most famous musicians of all time. Among the many oddities found at the stadium were the orange foul poles. Shea Stadium was actually the only ballpark to paint their foul poles orange, and Citi Field kept them the same. And the iconic home run apple that first appeared in 1980 and popped out of a magician's top hat whenever the Mets hit a home run. Shea Stadium was demolished in 2009, with the space being used for additional parking for the new Citi Field. Sheep Park. Opened in 1909 and demolished in 1976, Sheep Park was home to former baseball team Philadelphia Athletics, the Philadelphia Phillies, and NFL's Philadelphia Eagles. The original occupants of Sheep Park were the Philadelphia Athletics, who were owned at the time by Ben Sheep. Sheep had a vision in mind of a stadium that was built out of concrete and steel, and he turned that vision into reality with Sheep Park, the first of its kind that marked a shift in the way stadiums were built and looked at the time. The stadium was remarkably built in only 1 year at a cost of just over $300,000 at the time. Philadelphia already had a National League team in the Phillies, who came into existence in 1883, but that did not stop Ben Sheep from creating another team in the city for the American League, which came into existence in 1901. The Athletics were much more successful during their time at Sheep Park than the Phillies were, with the 1929 team in particular regarded by many as one of the best teams of all time. In 1953, Sheep Park was renamed Connie Mack Stadium, after manager Connie Mack retired from leading the Athletics for 50 years. Unfortunately, in less than 30 years later, the team would relocate to Kansas City in 1955 due to low attendance numbers and heavy debts, leaving Philadelphia with only one team in the Phillies. Sheep Park was mostly destroyed by a fire in 1971, and after it was completely demolished in 1976, the site eventually became home to a church. Tiger Stadium. The home to Detroit Tigers from 1912 until 2009, and Detroit Lions from the NFL from 1938 until 1974. Tiger Stadium was originally known as Nevin Field, named after owner Frank Nevin, then Briggs Stadium, before finally setting on Tiger Stadium until its closing in 1999. It was opened only 5 days after the sinking of the Titanic in 1912, and would go on to host baseball games for nearly a century. The ballpark was well known for having a short porch in right field, to the tune of only 315 feet after renovations were made to create an overhang above the upper deck. Among the many famous games hosted at Tiger Stadium, one that stands out the most is the All-Star Game in 1941, in which Ted Williams hit a game-winning home run. Tiger Stadium certainly had its quirks, among them being the flag pole in deep left center field and the double-deck outfield bleacher sets where fans got to see Cecil Fielder hit home runs over their heads on a regular basis. Speaking of home runs, 2 New York Yankees players in particular are credited as having the longest home runs ever hit in baseball history at this stadium. Babe Ruth hit a home run to center field in 1921, estimated at 575 feet, and in 1960, Mickey Mantle hit a home run at Tiger Stadium, estimated to be close to 600 feet, which many historians argue was the longest home run ever hit. While the stadium itself was demolished in 2009, the field was redeveloped into what is known as the Corner Ballpark, which is primarily used by the Police Athletic League for children. Ebbets Field. The home of Brooklyn Dodgers, Ebbets Field opened in 1913 and was known for being groundbreaking in many different ways. The most obvious one was Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier in 1947. But even before that, the ballpark was home to the first televised Major League Baseball game in 1939 that featured the Cincinnati Reds against the Brooklyn Dodgers, along with the first televised pro football game between the Dodgers and the Eagles. Ebbets Field was named for Charles Ebbets, who was its owner and was the one who bought the land to construct the stadium. The ballpark had one of the more unique dimensions given the constraints it faced with land in New York City, with the red field fence in particular being only 300 feet from home plate, although it did have a 9-foot wall with a large scoreboard in place. The exterior of the stadium was the most memorable, however, containing numerous arches with an 80-foot rotunda at the entrance made out of Italian marble. The Dodgers would eventually move out west in 1957 when an agreement could not be reached for a new stadium in the city, and in 1960 Ebbets Field was demolished. The field was turned into apartments that still exist today, along with a plaque commemorating the ballpark. Comiskey Park. When people think of sports on Chicago's South Side, they think of the Chicago White Sox and the once iconic Comiskey Park. The ballpark was actually built on a former city dump that White Sox owner Charles Comiskey purchased in 1909 to replace South Side Park. It was considered as a technological achievement at the time, being built of concrete and steel with a record capacity then at 32,000. Since its opening in 1910, numerous changes were made to Comiskey Park over the 8 decades of existence, with the most notable ones including an exploding scoreboard in 1960 that shot out fireworks and sound effects, along with the introduction of AstroTurf in 1969. An interesting fact about Comiskey Park is that it started the tradition of playing the Star-Spangled Banner. In 1918, the World Series was nearly cancelled due to World War I, but soldiers overseas were overwhelmingly interested in knowing how the series played out. The song was featured during the 7th inning stretch as a gesture to the soldiers and has been played ever since at the start of ball games. After the ballpark was demolished in 1991, it was then turned into parking for the new stadium that was built nearby. Bush Memorial Stadium. Opened in 1966, the Bush Memorial Stadium was home to the St. Louis Cardinals, both the MLB and the NFL teams. Containing arguably the most loyal baseball fans of any city in the United States, the St. Louis Cardinals needed a stadium that would stand the test of time and give fans a glimpse of all-time greats from Stan Musial to Ozzie Smith to Albert Pujols. Bush Memorial Stadium was actually built shortly after the Gateway Arch that defines St. Louis to this day, with the former being named after Anheuser-Busch, who owned the team dating back to 1953. The 96 arches that went around the top of the stadium paid homage to the Gateway Arch and also served as a unique feature that set it apart from other ballparks at the time. Similar to the previously mentioned Comiskey Park, Bush Memorial Stadium's field was replaced with AstroTurf in 1970 and remained until its professional football team, St. Louis Rams, moved into its new dome stadium in 1995. Bush Memorial Stadium was demolished in 2005, and with its proximity to the new stadium right next to it, much of the former ballpark was used to comprise the new stadium, with a small portion set aside for parking and various shops. Riverfront Stadium. Opened in 1970, Riverfront Stadium was home to Cincinnati Reds and Cincinnati Bengals. It was named Riverfront Stadium simply due to its proximity of being only 1 block away from the Ohio River, but it was mostly known as the home of the Big Red Machine. The Cincinnati Reds of the 1970s were one of the most successful teams throughout the entire decade, winning 2 World Series titles along with 4 National League pennants and an average of 95 wins per season. The stadium itself wasn't really anything special, as it was like most stadiums at the time with a circular design that was suited to host multiple sports in order for the city to save on expenses. It makes the list primarily for the Big Red Machine and its accomplishments, including Pete Rose's 4,192nd hit in 1985. Upon being demolished in 2002, most of the area of the former stadium was used for the new stadium, along with part of it being converted into the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center and Reds Hall of Fame and Museum. The Kingdome. No ballpark list would be complete without including a domed stadium, and the Kingdome is certainly one of the most iconic domed stadiums. Home to Seattle Mariners, Seattle Seahawks, Seattle Supersonics, and Seattle Sounders, the stadium opened in 1976, and it had an interesting name, originating from its location in King County, Washington. 2 unique features of the domed stadium were a right field wall that was 23 feet high and speakers that hung off the roof of the dome and caused numerous problems for both batters and fielders trying to figure out where balls would land as they were hit plenty of times. Even though the stadium itself wasn't very special, what made it special were the moments that occurred within it. The Mariners of the 1990s were one of the most exciting teams to watch, wowing fans with their incredible abilities. 1995 will always be etched onto the minds of Mariners fans who witnessed the famous ending of the ALDS against the New York Yankees with Griffey's iconic slide into home plate. The King Dome was demolished in 2000, and Lumen Field, the current home of the Seattle Seahawks football team, was constructed in its place in 2002. Forbes Field. Forbes Field was the home of the Pittsburgh Pirates from 1909 until 1970, and also hosted the Pittsburgh Steelers from 1933 until 1963. While most stadiums were named after their owners, Forbes Field was actually named for the street that was adjacent to it in Forbes Avenue. Interestingly enough, Forbes Avenue was named for British General John Forbes, who would inspire the city name of Pittsburgh in 1758. Like similar parks during the time period, the ballpark was constructed out of concrete and steel, with new features at the time including a 3-tiered grandstand behind home plate, luxury suites, and elevators. It was notoriously difficult to hit home runs for right-handed players, with the dimensions in left field ranging from 365 feet to over 450 feet in center field. Interestingly enough, the Pittsburgh Pirates in 1909 are considered as one of the greatest teams of all time, winning 110 games, and the World Series. The Pirates also won in the last year of the ballpark's existence in 1971. Forbes Field was home to quite a few memorable moments, including Babe Ruth's last home run hit in 1935. After suffering 2 fires, Forbes Field was demolished in 1971. The remnants of Forbes Field can still be seen today. Most of the playing area was converted into buildings for the University of Pittsburgh, but the center field and right field brick walls still exist.
Stadium.